My name is Brian. Chapter 5. John 2 points plus 1 big point plus 2 Isabel points. Thursday afternoon, Mr. Bingham holds up our slips of papers for the Animal Life project. For this project, he says, you'll be working with partners. He explains that whenever two people put down the same animal, that they'll work together. And when only one person chose a particular animal, they'll work with someone who has a similar animal. Like someone doing dolphins will work with someone that's doing whales. He hasn't looked at the other side of our papers to see who the people are, but he has divided the papers up just by the kind of animal. Dan and Richie get put together because they both put down raccoon, probably because of the raccoon that got into our food supply at the hideout. After announcing the horse people, the turtle people, the tiger and leopard people, and the cow people, Mr. Bingham says, let's see, we have two Canada goose here. He turns my paper over. One is Brian Toomey and the other is... Before he turns the next paper over, Isabel shouts out, oh no, not there! Isabel Morris. Not her, I say as I slump in my seat. No way. Everyone in the room is howling, but the Jokers Club aren't scratching their heads. Mr. Bingham doesn't get points for making jokes. Besides, this isn't a joke. Isabel really is my partner. 10 minutes later, the class breaks up into twos to work on their animal projects. Isabel Morris and I push our desks together and sit face to face. While the rest of the pairs are having fun, we're glaring and being angry at one another, and at Mr. Bingham for his stupid idea. No one else in the room hates being partners as much as Isabel and me. Mr. Bingham is smiling and being friendly as he goes from group to group, asking the kids questions and helping them do what he calls Phase 1, which is organizing for research. Isabel and I just sit there, not saying a word to one another. When Mr. Bingham gets to us, I look up at him, but I don't smile. What's the problem here? Mr. Bingham asks. Isabel looks at her big hands and mumbles, I can't work with him. He won't do anything. I'll have to do it all, and then when it's time for the report in class, he'll mess it up, and I won't get an A. Oh, Mr. Bingham says as he squats on his haunches so he can look at her in the face. You know, Isabel, he says, this project isn't graded only on the final report. It's also graded on how people work together. Isabel groans. He continues, and it's graded on how many different ways you use to gather information and on how creative you are in teaching the rest of the class about the Canada goose. Besides, I hope you do this project because it's interesting to you. You're not just working for a grade. But he won't do any work, Isabel tells him. We can't work together, I say. Why are you interested in the goose, Brian? Mr. Bingham asks. I tell him, not Isabel, about how much I like to watch and listen to them when they migrate, that I think they're neat. What would you like to know about them, he asks. Everything, like where they have nests and how far they fly when they migrate, and who their enemies are. Those are 3 good questions, he said. Maybe you should write those questions down, Isabel. I already know the answers, she tells me in that snotty Isabel voice. You do, I ask. So where do they have their nests? Around marshy places, she says. Marshy means wet. I know what marshy means, I tell her. But where are the marshy places? I don't know exactly where. Well, I tell her, I want to know exactly where, and especially if there are any in Sharon. Mr. Bingham unfolds his 6 feet 4 inches and stands up. He asks me, do you have any more questions? I do, Isabel says. How long is this project going to last, and how many times do I have to work with him? Mr. Bingham starts to look annoyed. I meant questions about the Canada goose, he tells us. Make a list of those questions. He claps his hands once to get everyone's attention. Class, he says, this is a 2-month-long project. You will meet with your partners in class for 15 minutes every 2 weeks, but I expect you to work together outside of class too. Isabel moans. I groan. Mr. Bingham continues, if your animals are local, include some field study. Do first-hand observation. How can I observe my animal? Charlene asks. It's an ape. Just watch, Isabel, John yells out. Some kids laugh, and Richie and Dan roar out as they scratch their heads. I scratch my head too, but I don't laugh because I'm facing Isabel. He said, just watch, Isabel. What? I ask. Stop it, she hisses at me. What? I'm not laughing. She has tears in her eyes, but she glares at me with a fury that could kill. I stop scratching because I know by her look that she thinks Dan and Richie and I are mimicking an ape, Isabel the ape, by scratching our heads. Mr. Bingham stops being friendly and happy about his idea of putting us in groups. "Enough," he says in his low, firm voice. The class quiets down. He takes 3 big, slow steps over to where John sits. John keeps grinning, but he has to be scared to death. All Mr. Bingham does is give him the first attention of the year. At the end of the day, as the rest of us are filing out of the room, Mr. Bingham stops me. "Look, Brian, I know you and Isabel aren't exactly best friends. I'd say. It's just a coincidence that you two ended up together. I know. I hope she'll learn something from you." I look up into Mr. Bingham's eyes for signs of craziness, but his dark brown eyes are clear and calm. I ask him, how's she going to learn anything from me? She thinks I'm the stupidest thing to ever walk the face of the earth. He smiles, "But you're not. You're very smart. She hates me, and honestly, I hate her." "Well," he says with a little laugh, "you have something in common." "Hate?" "No," he winks at me, "the Canada goose." I think I don't like Canada geese anymore. Not if Isabel Morris has anything to do with them. Mr. Bingham pats me on the shoulder. "Don't forget about your tutoring session with Miss Samuels in room 104. I walk down the hall thinking about how complicated my life has become since I found out I was smart and learning different. "Hey man, put a move on." It's Dan. He and Richie are standing at the end of the corridor waiting on me. Just then John comes charging down the hall. He grabs me by the arm and we run right past the room where I'm supposed to meet my tutor. As the 4 of us push through the front doors, we're cheering because John got out of detention faster than ever. At the bike rack, John tells us 5 joker points for me, and I have a new name for Isabel, Ape. "You mean Isa-Ape instead of Isabel?" I ask. "Yeah," John says, "exactly. Isa-Ape. Isa-Ape." We all laugh. He slaps me on the back. "Poor Toomey. What rotten luck you're having Isa-Ape for a partner." "How'd you get out of detention so fast, Dan?" asked John. I told him to go stuff it. Richie's amazed that John dared say that about Mr. Bingham, but I don't believe it, not for a second. I bet Dan doesn't believe it either. I think John told some whopping lie to get out of detention, like his mother's in the hospital or something. John and I ride home on our bikes like always. After he turns the corner onto his street, I turn around and ride back to school. When I get to the tutor's room, I'm all sweaty, out of breath, and half an hour late. "Well, there you are," Miss Samuel says when I come running in. "You must be Brian. I was afraid you weren't coming." She stands up and walks right up to me. "You surprised to see what an old lady I am?" she asked. I nod because Miss Samuels looks like she's about 100 years old. "I'm retired from teaching," she explains. "I volunteered to tutor you. I want to help you, but to do that, you must be here. You're very late." I say I'm sorry, and she promises she won't tell my parents if I promise that it won't happen again. She gives me a piece of homemade banana bread and a bottle of apple juice so I'll have energy for working with her. Then she hands me a pad and a pencil and said, "Let's start at the beginning. I'd like for you to write the alphabet for me, Brian." Next, she has me read letters off flashcards and tell her their sounds. It's when she's explaining the difference between consonants and vowels that I mumble. This is baby work. I'm afraid I might have hurt her feelings, but she doesn't seem to mind at all. "This work is elementary, I admit," she says, "but it's going to lead you right into more advanced work." She pats me on the back. "I wish that you could see into the future, young man, because then you would see that after we've worked together for a couple of years, you're going to be able to put any ideas you have into words, written words." "Years, I think? It's going to take years?" I feel awful. I want to ask Miss Samuel why. If I'm so smart, why will it take me years for me to learn to read and write, as good as even Richie or John? Miss Samuels is happy about teaching me to read. She isn't worried about how long it will take. "I can help you," she says. "You show great promise." At the end of my lesson, while I'm watching her set up a notebook for my phonics homework, I wonder what will happen if my friends find out about my afternoon sessions with a tutor. I wonder what they'll think if they know that I'm actually taking school seriously, that I'm not a true joker after all.